thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Diana Solistreva. I am from Mexico and I am a final year civil engineer student.
Hello everyone, my name is Hashim Rashid. I'm from Maldives and I'm a final year engineering student.
So we both work on a project called Making Decisions on Public Earthquake-Prone Buildings with the help of Supervisor Mark Milkey.
Our project deals with the project management and decision-making sector of civil engineering. We hope you enjoy our presentation.
So just to start with, I'm going to show you a news clip video from 2 weeks ago, and this is just to tell you how significant and recent the problem that we studied is.
Wellington Central Library is safe from demolition after a council vote to spend $178 million on strengthening work. It's been closed since last year when engineers discovered it posed an earthquake risk. Kushla Norman reports.
To demolish or repair, Wellington City councillors have decided it's a no-brainer, unanimously voting to spend $178 million on repairs. Rebuilding would have cost just $5 million more.
It is a significant cost, but the message we get from Wellingtonians is that they really value this building.
The Central Library closed suddenly in March last year when engineers found its precast concrete floors could pancake in a strong earthquake. Now it's to be strengthened with engineering features including base isolators.
The last thing we want to do is have a major earthquake in Wellington and people survive, that's good. But if the city itself doesn't survive, that's really bad. So we want to try and have a functioning city, and the library is part of that as well.
Awesome. So from that video we can get 3 things. 1, that the Wellington City Council chose to strengthen the library. 2, that it took them 1 whole year to just come up with that decision, and in the meantime the library was closed. And 3, this is a very expensive choice, $178 million. So what was wrong with the Wellington Library? Why did they choose to close it in the first place? And why didn't they come up with this decision a lot earlier? Or, why did they choose to not spend a little bit more and make a new one? So this is now where our project background comes in. After the 2016 Kaikoura earthquake, there was better understanding on the behavior of precast concrete flooring, and this made changes to our building code under the Building Amendment Act 2016. So it changed the way we identify earthquake-prone buildings. And this is exactly what happened to the Wellington Library. But it is not the only building. This is happening to all across New Zealand, to both private and public buildings. And if they fail below the standard, then they will have to either demolish the building, re-strengthen it so it meets the minimum standard, or replace it. But obviously, making these sort of decisions to public buildings is different. Public buildings are council offices, they are hospitals, prisons, or libraries. And you have to keep in mind that this is a very recent change in legislation, just 3 years old. So, councils don't have a general policy that tells them how to manage these buildings, and they're under a lot of pressure at the moment. So our project objectives are: 1, to develop a decision-making framework that ensures a more proactive decision-making for public earthquake-prone buildings. 2, undertake a case study of a public earthquake-prone building in New Zealand. And 3, balance seismic risk with other factors such as environmental, social, and economic. So how do we measure the earthquake-prone buildings? And so we measure this through what we call a percentage new building standard, or NBS. And so it represents, and this is really simple measurement because it shows the relative risk of a building in just one simple score. So a new building is given 100 NBS or more, and an earthquake-prone building has 34% or less of NBS. And that sounds like a big difference, like 134, and just the fact that if you're in an earthquake-prone building, just the name of it scares people. But NBS can be misleading. It only represents the risk of life and not the performance of the structure. So in a moderate earthquake, both buildings at 134 could perform similarly. So the figure on this slide, it's based on the government guidelines, and it shows the probability of fatality in a moderate earthquake for any given NBS percentage. And it's worth noting that a 100% building always has the probability of fatality, and any building with less than 15% always has the chance of survival in a moderate earthquake again. So everyone can make decisions, but when it comes to property that is not yours, how will you base your decision? And we found the two best methods most suitable for public buildings to be the multi-criteria decision analysis, or MCDA, and the cost-benefit analysis, CBA. And we chose to do a case study of the Palmerston North City Library because in 2018, they found it was at 20 to 25% NBS, and just in a few months, their council implemented a policy, which was to leave the library open while putting interim measures that mitigates the life risk. And then later we put hypothetical decisions that the city council could do as their next step to improve their to come to that decision. And now Hashem will continue explaining our findings of this case study. Thank you.
So a multi-criteria analysis evaluates decision options against a set of weighted criteria to figure out which options best satisfy these criteria. So the analysis was carried out on the Palmerston North City Library with the following criteria as we're given here. So 8 options were evaluated, including the option to do nothing. So life safety was given the priority with 40%, as it is what other factors must be balanced with. This is done by increasing the NBS of the building. Costs and time frame describe the financial feasibility of pursuing a certain option. It was given second priority with 30%, as any major financial decision is limited by the budget of the council. Heritage preservation and community resilience, these are unique benefits that are offered by public libraries and other public buildings. So we value this similar to how a commercial building would value the revenue it would generate over the long term. And finally, long life loose fit describes the long-term sustainability and resilience of the building. So out of the 8 options we evaluated, we found 3 suitable options that were applicable for future management of the building. And the highest score was given to a low-level remediation, which targets key structurally weak areas to bring them up to standard. So this option scored the highest because it gives an acceptable level of safety with the lowest cost, and it is the least disruptive to the community. It's interesting to note that the option to do nothing, or like an indefinite closure, scored the lowest in the multi-criteria analysis, but it is what a lot of councils are opting to do. So the 3 options that were selected from the multi-criteria analysis were then selected to be evaluated in a cost-benefit analysis. So a cost-benefit analysis lists down the costs and benefits associated with pursuing a certain option. It assigns a monetary impact for every single impact, so it can be compared in a base slide. So why were 3 options done and not all 8? So it's theoretically possible to do all 8 options we did in the multi-criteria analysis, but cost-benefit analyses are quite time-consuming and resource-intensive. So it is not worth spending that much time and money on results that may not be accurate. So the 3 options we evaluated, all of them had a benefit to cost ratio of less than 1, which means all of them cost more than the potential revenue, direct revenue it would generate. But it's important to remember that these are government-funded public buildings, so we instead look at these unique benefits for comparison. So the recommended option from the cost-benefit analysis was a rebuild on the same site. It provided the greatest amount of benefits, but also was the most expensive option. It's important to see that the rebuild, as you can see from the graph, results in a loss of heritage values as the existing building must be demolished. The lowest benefit to cost ratio was given by the lower level remediation. It's notable that this was the option that was most preferable in the multi-criteria analysis. This is because of how we value these unique benefits. Assigning a monetary value may not be the most accurate option for concepts such as heritage values or community resilience. Sometimes the subjective opinion of a multi-criteria analysis is better. But as you can see, the greatest difference comes from the reduced risk of fatalities. So how would you put a monetary value in a life? The New Zealand Transport Association recommends value of $4.92 million for statistical decision making. So from the graph you saw previously for NBS, you get the probability of a fatality for any given NBS, and using the average number of daily users for that building with the statistical value for life, you can get a monetized value for number of fatalities reduced, which may then be used and compared in a cost-benefit analysis. So this diagram shows how councils currently manage earthquake-prone buildings. So using seismic assessments, which assigns an NBS score to a building, earthquake-prone buildings are identified. Then councils undertake evaluations and peer review, and then usually come to a conclusive decision. So these are our proposed additions to the framework, which uses a multi-criteria analysis as a screening tool to filter out ineffective options. The selected top 3 options are then subject to a cost-benefit analysis to evaluate the financial feasibility. And then you have new information that you may present to stakeholders and assessors. So the full framework combines these two and uses the current methods as a starting point. And then it goes through this procedure, as you can see here. One of the key features is that you see this feedback loop that's going on here. And as you saw from the case study, the multi-criteria analysis and the cost-benefit analysis, they recommended 2 different options. So this feedback loop ensures that any possible disputes may be resolved before you move on. Also that it uses current methods as a starting point. It's easily adopted by councils for future procedures. The framework was developed through multiple case studies of earthquake-prone buildings in New Zealand, so it is theoretically applicable to any building in the country. So to conclude with, it's important to choose the correct methods to make informed public decisions. We want the government to be making proactive decisions and not reactive ones. The multi-criteria analysis was good at finding out the decisions that fit the objectives. It determines why a certain option is preferable over the other, while the cost-benefit analysis gives us how an option is executed, and most importantly, gives us how many lives we can save with a certain level of safety and what trade-offs come with it. And finally, our new framework allows us to reevaluate and conclude on which option is the best for the building. And it objectively evaluates many other factors and resolves any disputes that may come. As for our future recommendations, we recommend using an improved model to find the fatality risk. Using a Monte Carlo simulation, as we didn't evaluate any uncertainties in our risk evaluation. So, and then it's important to consider buildings with different importance levels. How you manage a swimming pool will be very different to how you manage a public hospital. And investigate methods used overseas, as we only use case studies in New Zealand. So countries like USA or Japan would have really good earthquake-prone building procedures.
We'd like to thank the following people for contributing to our project. Thank you.
And we would like to leave you with this quote as a food for thought. All right. Any questions?
Yes, thank you. Questions? Yeah, that was really an accurate presentation. I have 2 questions, if that's okay. The first one is, what factors do they consider when determining the NBS percentage?
Yeah.
Oh, the
And-
NBS.
NBS.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a measure of life safety. So it counts into many, many different factors, including like the seismic risk of the place, the area. So, say for example, you have a building in Auckland, and if you teleport that same building into Christchurch, it would have a different NBS score.
Like a lower one, because
Yeah,
like Auckland has a lowest seismic risk than Palmerston North.
yeah. So there's a website called EQSS, and there's a famous book called The Red Book, which fully outlines how you find the NBS of a building.
Okay.
Yeah.
The second question is there was a table that you had up and it put a money value to heritage and preservation. How did you determine that?
Oh yes, so there it comes. There's the New Zealand Treasury guidelines. It gives some like a guideline of giving values such as it even has stuff like the money for gaining a friend. So there are like society values that can be monetized, but it didn't have heritage loss, and there were assumptions that we had to make,
Yeah.
and these assumptions were made. What would the council pay to keep these things like heritage? What would the council pay annually to keep things such as the heritage of the library? And we, like, for example, we assume $100,000 per year for them to keep the library facade, something like that. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
No worries. Thank you.
Curious, two questions. First one is, would you feel comfortable in a 35% standard house or office?
So I mean, Palmerston North, it's 20%, and they're keeping it open. There's like there's a website. You will be surprised how many now they're on the 34%, and as what they're doing, like the mitigating measures that Palmerston North put, it's limiting the number of attendees in the library. So they at one time they only have 200 people, I think.
Attending an event.
Yeah. In my opinion, like just the label of earthquake prone, it scares me.
Yeah.
But the risk of fatality in an earthquake or injury is less than a road accident. And yeah. So I don't know. It's also
It's a challenging thing.
yes,
Yeah,
it
it's
is
Trying to
risk,
provide some sort of-
but you're also in risk when you are walking or driving.
Yeah, it's just the way it's labelled.
Yes.
It's very. It's not. It's like illusion. Yeah, it's a fear. That fear thing.
So those things also have a legitimate structural response.
Yes, of course. I mean, that's why councils, they don't want to hold the responsibility and they rather close it, not let people in while they're coming to a decision because they're fearing they don't want to be held responsible. But as we saw it, if we put in the money, it's the worst decision to do because you don't have other earthquakes all the time. And in that 1 year, like the library that closed, the Wellington Library, you lost a lot of social benefits that they come with it. It is a balance of life risk with other factors.
One last short question. Yeah.
This is a what if question. What if you were in charge of all the law and what would you like to change from the beginning? If you have the choice to change anything of this in the decision making process.
In the decision making process, I reckon just remove the fear mongering of NBS and have people know what it exactly means because a lot of property managers and people, they use NBS as a selling point. Say, oh, this is a 100 NBS building. So, like, people who are buying the building would think, oh, this is an earthquake-proof building. No, like, it's perfectly safe. But as you saw from the graph, it's not really true. So, I reckon a better presentation of what it really means so that you can communicate it to the people. But otherwise, NBS is a really good measure of how safety it is.
Right.
Hope that answers your question.
Very good. That's a good place to end it for young engineers. So thank you again for your presentation.